Men, in this lecture, you will understand exactly why cold therapy, immersion, ice baths, cold showers, after your training sessions can have a huge negative effect on your gains in the gym. Background, my name is Paul Green. For those of you that are new to the channel, welcome to the Longevity Strength Coach. It's great to have you here. I'm a former British paratrooper and Special Forces Sport Group operator and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu grappler. I have took a keen eye in all of these matters over the past 5 or 6 years as I've started really enjoying helping people with their injuries. Once, when I was in the gym, in the parachute regiment, we used to get people strong and extremely fit for the demanding job roles in which they had to go and do. But one of the parts of that job was to negate the negative effects of the demands that their job placed on them. I've worked with physios and exercise rehab instructors closely over the past 5 or 6 years. And yeah, I've got a very unique perspective on all these matters. If you appreciate them, subscribe to the channel. I post every single day on YouTube. Nowadays, I am a full-time online coach. I run the longevity program where I train men over the age of 40 that take part in extreme sports, adventure sports and martial arts. And they probably have better internet than me, but never mind. We continue. Before we can get into this video, we need to establish exactly what inflammation and the act of reducing inflammation is. We need to understand why we partake in these activities to improve, excuse my spelling, recovery. We'll quickly check in on what the science says, and then we have to re-establish and realign ourselves with what our goal is when we are training in the gym. So, if that sounds like something that you would find useful, then absolutely get yourself comfortable. I don't see this video taking much longer than 10 minutes, because my aim is to give you enough reasons to stop doing something that is potentially a waste of time in order for you to get the most from your training sessions. Okay, let's talk about inflammation and anti-inflammation. Inflammation, wherever it comes from, is when your body goes, I need to increase the amount of blood flow to this area for whatever reason. Increasing the blood flow to an area will help increase the amount of nutrients that go to that area to repair, regenerate, strengthen a certain area. That is inflammation. That is strategic. Now, you could get inflammation from an injury. That is when a crazy impact injury, you have been hit by a mountain bike on a trail and your knee has swollen up. Your body's went, hey, big lad, we need to sort this thing out. And the natural response, because the body is friggin' phenomenal, is to start healing. Does that make sense? However, there is an inflammation that happens when you don't realise, and that comes from food. Certain foods, especially those high in omega-6, are inflammatory foods. Now, if you have an excess of them over a few days or sometimes a few weeks, your joints will feel sore, even though you haven't really done anything to warrant their soreness. You just feel like you're sore. And that may be because you have unintentionally eaten an abundance of inflammatory foods. Now, I'll do a video separately on this, but this video is not about inflammatory and anti-inflammatory foods. However, that is inflammation, a body's natural response to dealing with a certain type of stress, whether that's a low amount of stress, whether that's a stress from food, whether that's a physical stress, whether that's an injury, across that whole scale. And now, reducing inflammation. This just came around from the medical system that seems to try and convince people that inflammation is bad. Take an anti-inflammatory to make this pill will stop you from having that inflammation, having that natural response of your body, stop you healing. Have this tablet to stop you healing yeah, the anti-inflammatory is a very cheap drug. Very, everybody's took them. I've took them. And yeah, they do that. However, just to touch on food while I'm there is anti-inflammatory foods. Like, fish oils, like wild fish oils, omega-3 is an anti-inflammatory food. And this comes back to where the food actually comes from. And let's say we're talking about meats. It usually comes down to the amount of frigging stress that the meat you have eaten has went through in its life. Is it from usually fight or flight? And then if it is from fight or flight, then the food that you eat will be usually high in omega-6, which is an inflammatory fatty acid. If it's free range, if it's organic, if it's wild, then it'll be a better version of the fat, being an anti-inflammatory fatty acid. But I'll get into that in a different video. It's actually quite interesting stuff, to be honest. But to summarise that, inflammation does not mean bad. Inflammation does not mean pain. Inflammation. I'm not gonna jump myself. Right. So with that, and with the fact that every medical system will say, here's a tablet, here's an anti-inflammatory tablet because inflammation is bad, there is then a whole host of cold therapy methods in the gym. I can't spell to save my life. In the gym, you've got your ice baths, you've got cold showers, you've got fitness influencers that push out cold showers on a morning as part of your, 4 a.m. ritual or whatever. And it's got a lot of people over the past couple of years to do this stuff. People buy bins, wheelie bins, and they'll pour ice in it. Or in the UK, they'll fill it up with water in winter months, and they will do a certain soak for like 2 or 3 minutes or something like that, and they will build it up for like mental resilience. Now, I have no doubt that achieves a little bit of mental resilience, putting yourself in a situation, but you have to be able to question the physical benefits of these methods and of these things, because the information that's pushed out loosely would say that it does this, right? So most of the information out there says that cold therapy will improve your recovery. So we need to really dig into the weeds and figure out actually whether it does that, and whether, if it does that, is it worth the negative effect. So that's what we're going to do here. But it is a fancy, shiny object, and especially if our gym's got one, we're gonna potentially use it. So what does the science say? So we've got quite a recent meta-analysis here, Feb 2024, by Alec Pinheiro et al. Actually, no, I'm lying. There's probably about 50 authors here involved in multiple papers. But yeah, anyway, a systematic review with a meta-analysis of the effects of post-exercise cold water immersion on resistance training-induced hypertrophy. So, to bear in mind, this is directly post-exercise, cold water immersion, resistance training and hypertrophy. So we're talking about within 15 minutes, yeah? Within 15 minutes of your training, doing a cold water immersion on hypertrophy. So the conclusion from this is that, I'll read it word for word, so I'm not going left or right of what I need to say. The current data provides evidence that the application of cold water immersion immediately following bouts of resistance training may modestly attenuate gains in muscle hypertrophy. When considering the practical implications of these findings, it is important to note that results of this analysis apply solely to immersion application within 15 minutes of exercise, which may not accurately reflect, most scenarios that people use them. Obviously, a lot of people use them on a morning, a lot of people use them on night, some people may use them on rest days. However, I know for a fine fact that a lot of people in, like, let's say the upper tier of gymnasiums will do these after they train, and that's what I'm doing. A lot of people on this channel, I know for a fact, train at some top gyms, and they will definitely be taking part in these activities, and this is just a warning to you when you consider doing these things to potentially benefit your performance or recovery. Anyway, I digress, as I do very regularly. If you don't like it, dislike this video. Anyway, it is unknown to us whether the degree of which intermittent use of cold water immersion or the time between resistance training sessions application may affect. Basically, it is unknown whether, say if you've done it 4 hours after you trained, how long does it take to then actually start getting your gains back. Anyway, so there's no like accurate timing post the 15-minute period in which was looked at here. It's just that 15-minute period. In addition to the current results suggest that resistance training in combination with cold water immersion may still induce gains in muscle mass, but to a lesser degree compared to resistance training alone. Now, how many of you do this after you do weights, after you do hypertrophy training? These findings may have practical implications for athletes looking to limit resistance training induced gains in muscle mass. That is a very interesting point. Now, you're going to have certain people that do not want, they want to train hypertrophy for certain injury preventative benefits. However, they do not want the muscle mass, extra muscle mass gains. For example, martial artists, boxers that have to compete in certain weight categories. This may be extremely useful to limit the amount of muscle mass that they gain. Do you know what I mean? Or cyclists, every single gram of weight that they gain could potentially have a negative impact on their performance. Same as mountain bikers, enduro racers. See what I'm saying with this? You have to be careful with this stuff because the general consensus is that this is good no matter what, and you need to use it accordingly. Further research is needed to understand the effects of different frequencies and timing strategies, like I've already talked about. Especially in resistance trained individuals and endurance athletes. This study was done on untrained athletes, untrained people. And obviously we're talking about hypertrophy, resistance training, not so much endurance athletes. So there's the science. And I need to bring you back to what is your goal when you are training. Now, as we get to the age of 40, our type 2B muscle fibers, those responsible for power, speed and strength, start to degenerate. So our muscle fibers are literally declining year by year. And how we counteract them is how we then negate, this from happening. But it starts with a hypertrophy training block. And the hypertrophy training block is we gain some muscle back. We train our type 1 and type 2B muscle fibers when we're doing hypertrophy. The start of the set starts off kind of like a slow twitch, and then the end of the set is like when we're really pushing it. That's when it's going to be, kind of power and hitting the other type 2B muscle fibers. That's why hypertrophy works really well, because it kind of ticks both boxes and we gain a lot more muscle fibers from this training. But I always go on about hypertrophy training from an injury preventative standpoint. I think it's absolutely great for reducing injuries, for starting to build some joint strength, control, full range of motion. But it needs to be progressed on to speed, power, strength, and all that stuff. Anyway, you have to remind yourself, if the goal is hypertrophy, we are doing certain exercises to strategically and consciously apply stress to certain areas of our body. The application of stress to certain parts of our body creates a little bit of inflammation in order for our body to then repair that inflammation to be better tomorrow, a couple of days after. And it's just a constant cycle. We apply stress to a certain part of our body recovers from that stress and expects that type of stress a couple of weeks down the line. Gets stronger, we can then apply more stress. Get stronger, we can then apply more stress. And then eventually our body becomes really resilient. So it's the strategically applying inflammation through resistance training, which is our goal when we are training. Now, these cold water immersion therapies, methods, whatever you want to call them, completely reduce all that. And yes, of course, you're going to go back to normal body temperature a couple of hours down the line. But why wouldn't you want your body to go straight into repair, recovery, regeneration mode as soon as you finish training, instead of delaying that by another 2 or 3 hours, because you fell into the trap of these cold therapy methods and influences, stuff like that. My challenge to you, gentlemen, is to literally just search it on Google Scholar, cold therapy methods recovery, or cold therapy methods hypertrophy. You know, a couple of words, and it'll come up straight away with what I've done today. So just to wrap it up, when something feels good, it's very rare that it's actually good for you. Similar point with saunas and steam rooms and stuff like that. Now, I haven't looked into the benefits on the skin with saunas and steam rooms. That's something that I'll probably do in the future. However, performance doesn't really benefit your performance. I've got a video on this way down my page about 50 videos ago. If it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. Like I said earlier on, definitely get yourself onto Google Scholar and fact check the claims and statements of most of these lunatics that are talking about ice this, ice that. Fucking ice, fuck your ice, shove it up your arse. It's a load of bollocks. Gentlemen, that is it from me. Hopefully you found this video useful. If you did, subscribe to the channel, and I will see you tomorrow.